Thank you very much for joining me here today, you guys. I'm going to share my screen with you and we'll get started. So this DocuSign course is all about understanding envelopes. Now, last week we did all about understanding PDFs and how you can take a PDF, bring it into an envelope and put fields on it as you need. We're not going to be focusing so much on the fields aspect of PDFs today, although we will be going over that. Mostly I'm going to be showing you how to effectively use envelopes in DocuSign and to make it as easy as possible and to make it so that you don't run into any brick walls and go, what the heck just happened here? So with that being said, we'll start off. I'll go ahead and I always do this the same way so that you can see that the way that we get to DocuSign is always initially from the contact within our database. And I'm talking about command here. So we always go to command and we locate our contact. So I'll go ahead and bring up a contact here. And in the case of this contact, I know that I have a bunch of opportunities for this contact. And instead of going over to the opportunities section of the program and trying to find them, I can come over here within the contact record and just go to opportunities and see all of the opportunities that I've got and created for this contact. Now, this particular contact, I'm actually going to reuse the class that I did for the PDF session last week. I'm going to reuse that opportunity. I just created an opportunity for that class. And in doing so, I want you to remember that you always need to, especially if it's a listing opportunity, you always create the name of the opportunity in the following way: the who, the what, and the where. So now we're talking about the name of an opportunity. The name of the opportunity is always who the opportunity is for. And here we have Jackie Astuto. And then it's what is what kind of an opportunity. And in this case, it's a listing. So we see listing as the name. And the where. Now the where, I've changed the name here. The where is normally the address of the property. So the who, what, where. Once that's done, when we get into the opportunity itself, we always add the property address to the opportunity. If it's a listing and it's in the MLS, then we click this button here and we find the MLS listing. If it's a listing, but it's not in the MLS, we can put in the property address directly over here. And that way we can add the MLS later, because sometimes you get the opportunity before you get the listing in the MLS. So you need the property, but you don't have a listing yet. Okay. Once all that's done, we come over to the Documents tab. And in the Documents tab, we pick the checklist type for the documents that we're going to need for this opportunity. So we always pick the checklist based on the type of checklist, which is in this case listing. And in this case, also where that listing is and where you're licensed. So we have a New Hampshire address. So we're using a New Hampshire listing checklist for this listing opportunity. Once all that's done, now mine has already been created here, but you would click the create a transaction or start a transaction. And that start a transaction button would take you directly to your brand new DocuSign room. In this case, I've already got a room. So I'm going to click on sign in to DocuSign or go to transaction. And it's going to take me through the DocuSign process of signing in. And I am now in the room specifically for this transaction. So that's how we get to DocuSign. Contact, opportunity, start a transaction, or go to a transaction, depending on how far along you are in the process. Okay, now in DocuSign today, we're going to be focusing on envelopes. So let's talk literally about the envelopes area of the program right now. So in this case, we're in the specific room. Here's the Jackie Astuto listing class. And here is the details, documents, people, and envelopes. So right here is the envelopes. Now, you'll notice that in the envelopes area, or the envelopes tab, if you will, you can do some sorting here. You can sort by names, A to Z, last modified, oldest to newest. And you can also see mine and others. This applies really only because we are part of the umbrella for DocuSign for KW. And when we say mine and others, if you were to invite another agent to this room to work with you on the documents, then you would see any of the other envelopes that that other agent has created. But that only applies when you're actually on the People tab here. If I come back over to the People tab for a moment, it only applies if you invite another agent to join this room. So you can see that by default, the people that are in this room, and this does not include the contacts that you're sending the documents for signature to. The contacts that you're sending signature, they're not in the room. I know that people get confused on this, but what they are is they're recipients. That's all their role is as a seller, as a buyer, as a role, is to be a recipient.
Hey, Kathleen, hold on one sec.
Okay. And with that knowledge, they're not actually in the room. What they are is they are recipients in the process. The people that are in the room, though, are always going to be these three people. The KW admin, which is the owner of the room. And I don't mean the owner of the room specifically, is really the owner of the entire platform of DocuSign within Keller Williams. And then there's us. The room owner is always KW. KW, because if we didn't have them in there, then the compliance officers would not be able to get into DocuSign to view your documents and make sure that they were on par. So the KW admin is like the owner of the account. The Keller Williams Coastal Lakes and Mountains Realty is the owner of every single room. If you don't see that little yellow sticker there with KW in it, or KR in it, then you created the room independent of command, and it is not connected to command, and the compliance officers can't see in there. So not that you need to come here and look. You don't even need to worry about it. If you use command to create the transaction, you won't ever need to worry about it. Okay. But if you are having trouble and you're saying to yourself, why can't I get my documents? Why can't I get this? Why doesn't this work? You can come in here and say, well, if that person's not in the room, then connection is not established. And then of course there's you. So tying this all back to that discussion about what's in the envelopes, about being able to see yours and other people's envelopes, other agents' envelopes, is if you were to add another agent to the people section, that agent would be there. So let's see what happens here. If I go in here and I look for Alice Kubacki, A-K, let's see if it pulls it up. U-B-A-C-K-I at KW. Is it Alice K, right?
Yep.
Alice K, A-L-I-C-K at KW.com. And there is Alice Kubacki. All right. So we're going to put you on the same side as this and put you in as, we'll put you as an agent owner. Why not? And then we'll invite you. Now that I've added Alice, look at this. She hasn't even clicked through to connect yet, but she will get an email and she will be in this room, which means that if she was to create an envelope for signature process, because she's my partner now in this room, then this would give her the ability to create envelopes and to work envelopes, basically working side by side with me. That's the kind of the purpose of this people tab and why the envelopes have mine and others. Okay. Mm-hmm. So that might be a little known feature there for you, is the ability to bring another agent in to work with you. This also applies if you are working with an admin assistant or someone like that can get into the room as well with you. So, okay. So now, Alice, did you receive an email yet?
I don't know. I didn't look.
Why didn't you look? Come on, I sent you.
I didn't know I was supposed to get one.
I sent you a nice invite.
I did.
Uh-huh.
I did. I got an email from Robert Vincent.
All right. So now Alice, if you don't have to do this part, Alice, but if she was to click through and accept that, then she would be added to this. Actually, she's already added to the room, but you would be able to come in here and function inside the room just as if it was hers. But remember, though, this is kind of important. Alice doesn't have access to my command opportunity. She only has access to the DocuSign room. So while I've been talking up about how we always go to DocuSign through command, in this case, Alice couldn't. She could because she doesn't have my command opportunity. She has hers, but it's not connected to this room. So she would always have to go directly to DocuSign. And so let me address that really briefly. And we'll take a little bit of a side trip here, put a pause in this conversation, and I'm going to take you a little bit to the left. Accessing DocuSign outside of command. So I'm going to log out of DocuSign, okay? And I'm going to see, okay, well, there's the DocuSign login. I'm going to close that and say, you know what, forget it. As a matter of fact, I'm going to close this and we'll just look at command here. Completely forget that command is even open. I'm going to open a new tab, not using command, and I'm going to go to DocuSign. And when I do that, if I put in DocuSign.com, which is logical because you think, well, DocuSign.com. Well, look what happens. It actually does not take you to the real estate rooms portion of DocuSign. DocuSign has two major products. One of them is DocuSign e-signature, and that's what you're looking at here. So when you go to DocuSign.com, the public address of DocuSign doesn't show you DocuSign Rooms, or better said, or more appropriately said, rooms.docusign, because this is the public-facing website for DocuSign. So if that's the case, when you go to log in up in the top right-hand corner, you can barely see it up here. When you go to click log in and you log in with your standard account and your standard information, because you entered DocuSign from the e-signature side, what you end up with is this interface. And this is not DocuSign Rooms where your real estate transactions occur. This is for anybody, myself, you as a non-agent. We can create an account here and use DocuSign to have anyone sign any type of document that we want. My wife is a justice of the peace, and she uses this to sign the contracts when she gets services for when she marries people. So she uses this. She's never seen DocuSign Rooms, but she uses this side, and this is a product that's available for anyone. Now, when we want to think about it in terms of real estate, because you're connected to both as a Keller Williams agent, you have access to DocuSign e-signature and you have DocuSign Rooms. You can actually switch between them from this interface. Two ways. One, right down here in the lower left-hand corner, it says DocuSign Rooms. The other way is to go to your profile icon and click on Switch to Rooms. Now, a fast way to remember this is if you need to go to a DocuSign room, go to the room first. Type in rooms.docusign.com, and that will take you into Rooms first. So if I was to log out of this, and now I'll just go ahead and close it and open up a brand new tab. And with that new tab, I can go over here and type in rooms.docusign.com. And now, there we go. And now it's putting me into the rooms for real estate. So if I click continue, there's my password, boom, boom, boom. In we go. And now I'm in DocuSign Rooms. Okay. Does everybody understand that difference there? So you can use two products. You just need to access them the correct way. Okay. So now when you are in DocuSign Rooms, the way that I just enter it, it doesn't dump you straight into the room that you're working with. You have to go to the Rooms tab at the top and find the room that you want to work with. So here we are. Now we're into the room again. All right. So back to that envelopes area, and we have it here. Now, let's talk.
So, Robert, can I ask a quick question?
You got to hold on. Do you have $1 on you? Because each question is $1 today. It's Tuesday.
All right. I can ask two questions then, because I only got $2.
Okay.
So why and when would you use that DocuSign.com as opposed to coming in through command?
That's a really good question. Generally speaking, you most of the time are going to go to DocuSign through command. Okay.
Mhm.
You're not going to go to rooms.docusign. However, if you're in some kind of a situation where you're out on the road and you need to get into DocuSign and you've got a bad connection and your computer's slow, instead of having to wait for command to load up and wait to navigate to all the pages to get to the go to transaction button, you could bypass that and go to rooms.docusign login and kind of save yourself some time. But that's only if you know that once you go in there, you still have to navigate to the correct room. Once you're in the room,
Right.
the look and feel is exactly the same. So it can be a shortcut to get there. The danger is, though, and I say this to pretty much everybody, is we'd never, ever, ever, ever want to go to rooms.docusign.com to create a room. We never want to do that, because doing that does not connect that room to command. It becomes an independent, standalone agent out there with no connection, and it can't be reconnected. It can't be connected later. So that's one disadvantage to doing that. But it's also, if you think about it, if you understand it, you can still totally use the program in many ways, in various versions, but you just need to know where you're at. Okay, so in this envelope section here, I mentioned that we had a couple of different filters and tools there. We also have over here on the far right-hand side, underneath the Actions button, we have a button that switches from Grid View to List View, and Grid List. Now, I'm a big fan of List View. I find the big, huge icon buttons here to be a little bit like, what's going on? There seems like it's all trying to fit onto an image, whereas this one is more of a traditional, like a spreadsheet look, like columns and information. And number two is, when you're looking at the grid view, each of the items that are on here are not explained. And what I mean by that is, for example, down here at the bottom of the image, the tile, there says there's one document in the room, in the envelope, one document in the envelope, and that there's one person. And in the next envelope, there are two people in the envelope and two people in, two documents in the envelope and two people. Whereas when you're looking at it at list view, you can see the same information, and I think that it looks a little cleaner. It's a little easier to get your head around. I just like it this way, but it doesn't matter. It's totally up to you. There's nothing about what we're doing here that impacts anything. Okay, so now a couple of other things. I mentioned the collaboration. We have Alice in the room right now, and she's been added as essentially a teammate that can work on this. In the rooms here, right over here on the right-hand side, there's a create new message topic. So I could go here and I could put a message to Alice, check P and S. And so I could put a message in here, blah, 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 blah. And then I could send that message to Alice, and I can communicate with her in this room. I can do the same for the administrator. Admin here for Keller Williams Coastal Lakes and Mountains. Essentially, what you're doing is sending a message to compliance if you're doing this, okay? So if you had questions about something that was happening in DocuSign in a specific room, you could use these message topics to actually communicate with them. Now, it might seem a little bit kind of out of step, because you could do that through email, but you could also do that through command using the chat dialog box in command to talk to compliance. But in both of those cases, you would have to say, in my room labeled Jackie Studio listing PDF, da, 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 da. You'd have to give them the information so that they knew what they were talking about, or knew what you were talking about. But if you did it this way, they would have direct access to this room and be able to go right to it to solve the problem if there was one. So that's one of the nice things over here. Now, because
where does the message go?
This message here, like in the case of like sending it to you, it's going to go to your email. In the case of sending
Okay.
it to KW Coastal Lakes and Mountains, it's going to go to compliance, which is actually compliance at KW, which is Colin and Jason.
Okay.
All right. So also notice here that on the we do have an actions button in the top right, but it is not exclusive or specific to the envelopes area that we're in. The actions button is exporting a room summary, add existing envelopes, close room, or leave room. Okay. It's not exclusive to the envelopes area. In the new button, you'll notice that the new button creates a new envelope for us. Okay. And I'm going to get rid of that brand new envelope. Now, I want to talk about that button in a moment, but I'm going to go backwards a little bit before we do that because I don't want to show you that until we've shown some stuff about the envelope process. So in this envelope area, we have two envelopes. One is, they're both completed, and we're going to go back and we're going to create a new envelope from some documents, and we're going to show you what we can do in here. So to do that, I'm going to go back to the documents area of DocuSign. And in the documents area, this is where we get the documents to put into the envelope. Now, some of us are a little bit older, and we remember watching movies where they would show a big office building in New York City with a row full, a floor that was completely filled with office desks and people typing away, and up and down the aisles would go a guy with a cart, the mail cart, and on that mail cart you'd see tubes and envelopes and boxes sticking out of that, and that guy would go up and down the aisles and he would deliver or pick up packages to be taken to the mail room and then distributed to where they needed to go, whether it would be inside the building or external outside of the building. When we are in the documents area and we are thinking about creating an envelope, I want you to imagine that guy walking up and down the aisle with his cart, and you're about to put an envelope in his cart. What goes in the envelope and what you do with the envelope is private to the envelope. It is exclusive to that envelope, and nobody can open it but the people that we label as recipients that need to do what they need to do. So you're going to put together a packet, but you're going to put it on that cart and they're going to take it away. So when you're looking at the documents that are available, and I say documents because it's an easy broad word, but I really should be using the term forms or documents, because we have two kinds of objects that can be added to envelopes: forms and documents. A form is always a blue iconed object that is a fillable DocuSign form. What that means is there are fillable fields that you can fill out from the Documents tab, which we're in right now. We can go into these blue forms and complete certain information. And I say certain information because you cannot fill out all of it unless that form is designed for you, the agent. Most forms have parties involved, roles. Somebody's the seller on the form, somebody's the buyer, somebody's the broker, somebody's the agent, somebody's the this, somebody's the that. Well, these forms are designed to know who plays what role on the document. And if we use it properly, we can attach the people in the room, whether they be our other agents in the case of Alice, or whether they be someone that is the recipient of the participant in the room, the seller, the buyer, other agents, and so forth. If we combine the people in the room with the document, then we get the right fields to be filled out in a form. Now, all bets are off on PDF. A PDF version or document is not a form. There are no pre-fillable areas, no slots to put any information in. When you open up a PDF in this room, in this documents area, it's essentially as if you had printed it out and you're looking at it. There's nothing pre-fillable, nothing electronically fillable on it. Okay, that's it. We can add areas on PDFs for people to fill out and sign, but it has to be done manually. Whereas on blue forms, it's done for us. So let's take the property disclosure here. We have a property disclosure form. And in this form, when we open it up and view it, it's going to show us, you see it really quickly, it popped up with a bunch of fields, those little boxes here that we can see popped up before the actual content of the form. And those are fillable fields. So anything that's on this document where I can put my cursor in and it has that yellow little tooltip, it's telling you what that field is for, what the expected value would be, and whether or not you can edit this. So like when we look at this optional seller 1 name and optional seller 2 name. So these two fields are for us to put the seller 1 and seller 2. So seller 1 has automatically been added because the role of seller 1 was defined in the details area of this document, of this room. And so Jackie Astuto is now occupying the role of seller 1. There is no seller 2, so the field didn't populate. Now, that doesn't mean I can't enter something in here. I can put that in here if I want. Now, if I do that, though, I am not connecting that to anybody in this document. I am just filling it out here. Now, you want to be careful, though, because what I am doing is I am adding seller 2 to the details area of the program of the room. If I finish this document and save it, where there was no seller 2 name before, now there is. And that means that any document that I pull in that has a fillable field called seller 2 is going to look at the details area and go, oh, when this guy filled this out, he added a name in seller 2. I remember that name, and I'm going to populate any document that refers to seller number 2. And I'll be honest with you, what happens is agents will fill something out here, but what you think is happening is you're just adding it on this form. You're not. You're adding it to any form that references seller number 2 in this particular case. So by entering it once, you're entering it everywhere. And sometimes that can be frustrating because maybe you're doing one document where you want seller 2's name on it, but other documents you don't for some reason. There's no magic formula here. That's just an example. If you enter it here, you're going to be entering it everywhere else. And so that doesn't do you any good because now to get rid of it everywhere, you just have to get rid of it in one place. And I get more than one phone call that tells me that people will say, Robert, I put a name in there on one document and I pulled it off of one other document because I didn't want it on there. And now it's gone from everywhere. What's going on? Why is DocuSign screwing me up? And the answer is DocuSign's not screwing you up. DocuSign is doing exactly what it's supposed to do. The seller 2 information, that's seller 2. So that goes everywhere seller 2 goes. So be very careful about filling out fields like this on any document. Now, when we slide along a little bit further, we see parts of this document that we know are going to be filled out, but we don't have any ability to touch those areas right now. And Jen Vashon, when she does the Essential Forms overview every month when we do the new agent orientation, she always talks about this particular form in this form in particular. And she always says, listen, this is a property disclosure form, residential only, to be completed by seller. Any agent that is filling this information out in the water supply, in the sewage, and anything like that, you are not supposed to do that. DocuSign knows this. So DocuSign does not make these fields available to you, but it doesn't mean that they won't be available when the seller receives the electronic copy of this. In fact, all of these will have little checkboxes. All of the lines will have boxes for them to fill out, but you as the agent are not supposed to do it. If you're an agent and you're sending this document to yourself and filling it out, you probably should talk to Jen Vashon whether or not you're even allowed to do something like that. And Alice, let me ask you, because you also teach the contract classes, can an agent in some way fill this out for the client before they receive it? You're unmuted, by the way.
Actually, they cannot. And the only, you can do all kinds of tricks of the trade and fill it out. But in this format in DocuSign, no, you cannot, you can't fill it out. You can, if this is New Hampshire, for Maine, you can, because in Maine, it says that the agent, can assist the client. Now, I don't know in DocuSign, I don't remember whether it comes up that way, but in Maine, it does say that the agent can assist the client to fill it out. But in New Hampshire, it's just the seller.
Well, and what
And
about
you
in
can
Massachusetts?
verbally assist them, but you can't fill it out.
Right. What about Massachusetts for the same question?
For Mass, no, you cannot. The seller fills it out.
Okay. So with that knowledge, we know that we don't see any options on this particular document for us to even touch. So this form will light up like a Christmas tree when the actual seller, in this case, seller 1 and or seller 2, depending on whether you have them both, it will light up and it will have those spots for them to fill out. Okay. So keeping that in mind as the agent, it's actually trying to protect you. So what can be done, can be done. What can't, cannot. All right. So now that we know that, let's take a look at taking this document into an envelope and seeing what we can do. Now, I'm only going to use this one document as an example. I will be coming back in a few moments and we'll take a look at a PDF version of the exact same thing, but we're going to start by taking a look at the form version. And I'm going to do them separately because I want you to notice that the way that the envelope functions is different if you have a form versus a PDF or both, because you can bring both of these documents into a single envelope and do it. So let's take this envelope and create it so that we can give it to our guy on the cart so he can take it down to the mail room. So we have a couple of choices. One, we can right-click the document, and there's a little pen icon that says Create Envelope. The pen icon indicates that this is where you get your signatures. I find it kind of humorous that the envelope creation process is identified by a pen, whereas the email is identified by an envelope. That's how far we've gotten into technology, where the envelope is now email. I don't even know what to say. They should have a manila envelope here. Manila is a color. So we'll go ahead and create our envelope. Okay. So when I create an envelope. So look what happens here. So the envelope area with the big blue bar across the top. So we have a please DocuSign. This is the name of the envelope in the top left-hand corner, which we can and must change right here. Over on the top right, we have help. We have actions. We can copy or delete this envelope. And we can also view the envelope history, but not yet because this envelope doesn't really have any history. So this isn't actually a button yet. We can also save and close and make this a draft. You want to read this as save as draft and close. That's what you want to read. The next button over here, we're not going to click that yet because we haven't finished the envelope and we're not ready to move on. But in the envelope details area, you can see that it's showing you the room and the name of the name of the room, and it's showing you the last modified date. So let's start at the very top, the envelope name. Now, if you were sitting in that office that I keep on describing, and you had an envelope in front of you, and it was, let's say it was a brand new envelope that hadn't been used before, because if you remember, those old manila envelopes had dozens of lines where you would just fill out the next line so they could reuse the envelope. So the next line would be the name of the envelope and its purpose. In this case, if we think about it as being the first time we opened up this envelope, please DocuSign is the default text here. That's the name of this envelope. But that's really bad because later on, when we're looking at the envelopes in DocuSign, if we don't know what's in them, we always have to keep opening them to find out. You can see the mnemonics there. It's obvious that we need to know what this is. So always fill this out. This one here is the property disclosure form, NHAR. Try that again. NHAR. No, it doesn't want to do it. Okay, fine. So there's the property disclosure form. By giving it a label, now if you have multiple forms in here, you could say multiple forms, including property disclosure form. Whatever you need to do to make it so that you know what's in here. Now, we do see the property disclosure form has already been added to this document or this envelope. And we can view this. But let's take a look at the view and see what happens. I'm going to click view. And it says, okay, here is the property disclosure form, residential only. And you're looking at it and you're like, okay, yeah, that's oh, should I make a change there? Well, maybe I should, but you can't. You can't edit this. You can't do anything, right? You can, however, download. I hate saying this because it gives ammunition to those of you who aren't doing it right. But what you could do is you could download the form as much as you've filled it out. And if you've done the agent side of the work and all of the agent fields are filled out, you could physically download this and print it and do wet signatures because you've got the stuff that needs to be filled out then ready for the stuff that will be filled out by the person. So I can't even believe I gave you that ammunition.
So Robert, why don't you name the envelope, if it's got multiple documents in it, the address of the seller or something like that versus just what's in it, like property disclosure form?
Well, that's a really interesting question because as much as we talk about having property addresses and as much as we talk about having those tools, remember that the name of the envelope, just the name of the envelope now, is just for you. And you will only ever find that envelope in this room to do with this property with these people. You'll never find this envelope in any other location. So won't Keller Williams liability review understand what that is and know if they have to look into it? That's what it is? Well, again, because of where it is in the process, it's already encapsulated in the address. The address is what contains the envelope. So you could, and remember, this is for you, for your purposes of being able to find things. So if that works for you, by all means. But what I recommend in the case of especially when you're dealing with multiple signatures, not people, but multiple times you have to send things out. If you're using multiple envelopes, you may find it a little confusing if all of them say the address, but none of them say what's in there. So it's really for you. Okay, so there's your little cheat, and I can't believe I told you about that, but there's one more thing here. We're looking at this. We have no editability. This is a view-only screen here, but we can click on that link at the very top where it says PDF. Oh, actually, it just opens it up. I thought it was going to open it up in a separate window. Never mind. But this one here, the download and the print options allow you to get that PDF out. Remember, in its currently filled out state, not signed, but filled out. Okay. All right.
And Robert, and I would just say that, you said you just gave us some information, but sometimes you go in and fill out your part, and there still are people out there that don't have computers.
True.
So then you can take that and copy it. And when you're going to see your client, you just copy it off and take it with you. And
Yep.
I certainly still have people that don't have computers. So you fill out all that you can, and then you copy it all.
Well, Alice, I know that, mainly because you only respond to people with AOL addresses. That's why everybody you talk to doesn't have a computer. We joke about that all the time. Oh man. Okay. No, you're right. Alice is absolutely correct. This exists for a reason. This exists for those occasions when you've done all you can as an agent to fill out what you can. And now it's time for you to get this document physically so that you can get it signed out. The reason I joke about, not really joke, I'm probably 51% serious about this, is in most cases where people are printing this off, it's not because their client doesn't have the ability to use a computer. It's frankly, it's out of laziness. They don't want to use the rest of the process, and they do this to kind of skirt and get around things. And I know that because I'm always asked, how do I do it? So that to me tells me what the motivation for many times this is done. And I try to avoid that because you're not getting that electronic certification. You're using a wet signature. Now, is wet signature bad? Have we reached a point in technology history where physical signatures are now poo-pooed upon? Like, oh no, God, no, that's terrible. It needs to be digital. Because I remember years ago when digital signatures, no way, nobody will ever accept that. It has to be in ink. And now it's kind of shifting. It's like, well, no, we want it digital. We want it through DocuSign. We want that certification, But in any case, I'm not telling you shouldn't or can't. I am, in fact, telling you how to do it. It's up to you to determine whether or not it's the best course of action. And in your case with Alice, with what you're saying, that's the best reason to do it. Unless you want to do in-person signing. Now, this takes into account physical travel distance. I get it. But in-person signing is digital signing with you as the agent sitting at the table with them, where you turn the computer around and put it in front of them, and they can do the signatures electronically with you there. And that's the difference between an ink signing and an in-person digital signing. The difference is one is electronic with them there and you there, and one is a piece of paper with ink on it. Both of them end up with the net same. Okay, so that's how we previewed that document. And we do have 3 buttons down here for action down at the lower right of that document. We have a remove button, which is exactly the same as the X button in the top there. We do also see that the name of the document is included, and it shows that it's 5 pages and who brought that document in. We can, if we've decided we need additional documents in this envelope, we can add documents to the envelope by clicking on Room Docs right here, and we can click on documents that are currently in the room that we can bring into this to add to the envelope. So this, if we wanted to bring 2 and we forgot to bring the second one in here and we needed to bring it later, this is what we can do. So you can see that there's the documents that are currently in the room, and you can bring those in. Okay. Now, the other one here is there's a Use As Template button. Use a template, not as template. It's something where I'm not going to get into in this class because it's all about templates. But there are template options that you can actually bring in templatized documents. Now, that involves e-signature and some other stuff, so I'm not going to get into that in this class because we're keeping it strictly here. There is also a More button over here where we can upload additional documents from, if we're connected to Dropbox or Google Drive or from our computer. Now, why would we do this? Same exact thing when we said we needed to add a document. If I had a flat PDF, because uploading documents can only be PDFs. All right. So we're not talking, you can't upload a form document that has those fields that you can fill out. So when we say upload, we're talking about bringing in a PDF. Now, as I mentioned, I'm going to show you how to use PDFs in a moment here, but the form documents and PDF documents are handled differently. So I don't want to confuse that here, but you can bring in multiple documents then from the room or from your computer. Okay. Now here is the most important section, the add recipients to room, to the envelope. So we know that Jackie Astuto is listed as the seller in this case, and I only kept her name on it. I didn't do 2 people. I just did her name. We also know that that role of seller was populated on the form when it pulled her name in and said Jackie Astuto is seller 1. Well, that role also has spaces for her to sign the document, but we will only be able to attach her to the signature spots and all those little the check boxes and fields and all that if we bring in the pre-tagged roles option. And what this essentially does is it says you got a document that's got a bunch of pre-tagged areas that are defined by the role, seller 1, seller 2, agent, and so forth. You've got a person in the room. In the details area, you put Jackie Astuto and you put her in the slot of seller 1. Let me merge those two things together for you so that wherever Jackie Astuto seller 1 is supposed to sign on this document, I will automatically make it so that that's the fields that she sees. So we choose PreTag Roles. If we were to choose room participants, it's not going to line up the people with the role. If we choose email address, we're talking about completely blind. The system is like, yeah, it's a complete third party. Even if it might be the same person, it's something we don't want to typically do. We cannot use PreTag Roles on PDFs. You will see this disappear when PDFs are in here because PDFs do not have pre-fillable fields. So we'll use PreTag Roles. Now, I see a lot of people when they come up to this dialog box, they see it, they see the checkboxes on the left, and they're like, okay, let me put a checkbox, and then they go to the recipient. Let me save you a little bit of time. Seller 1, we already know that on seller 1, Jackie Astuto has been defined as seller 1. Boom. It automatically pulls her name and it puts a checkbox. There is no seller 2, and we are not working with buyer 1 or buyer 2. So the only person on this document that I need to have here is Jackie Astuto. So I'm going to go ahead and click Add Selected. So what that does is it ties Jackie Astuto's email address and information to the next page with all the fields. It also defines her and when she's going to sign this and all that. Now, if I add another recipient, let me go ahead and can I put this seller to? Can I put myself? I'll put myself in here just to show you what happens with the names and numbers. So when you add multiple people here, you get a box for each person. And I'm often asked this question. Well, Robert, what if Jackie Astuto is seller number 1 and, John Astuto is seller number 2, but they both share the same email address? How do I send DocuSign to them so that it knows and they know that the signatures are required for each of them? It's very simple. As long as the names are different, Jackie Astuto, John Astuto, or whatever the second name is, the emails can be the same. And each recipient will receive at that email an email that says, Dear Jackie Astuto, please fill this out. This is your part of the form to fill out. And that exact same email is going to go out to the same email address for John, but he's going to receive a separate email that says, John, please fill this portion out. And it will know who each person is and where they're supposed to fill out if you do it this way. Now, if you want them to go out simultaneously, leave the ones on the left. That means it's called shotgun. They'll just both go out together. If you want it to go so that Jackie signs it first, completes her process, and then it goes out to the second person, change the number of person number 2 to 2. And this way, when the first person has completed their signature process, then the email goes out for number 2, which means seller number 2, or whoever the second recipient is, they can check their email all day long. But until this first person hits the send back, I'm done, finished button, this is never going out. So it doesn't.
So Robert, so who fills out all the information on a property disclosure form? 1 or 2?
Well, in this case, I'm giving you a little bit of an extended pseudo example of 2 people. In the case of this particular document, we only have one seller, Jackie Astuto. But if there were 2 people, that's a great question. Let's look at this, the documents, and I can show you where seller 1 fills out on the form and where seller 2 would fill out. Okay, because it is different. So that's actually a very good question. Let me finish this really.
Don't they have to do it together? Don't they have to do it together if there's 2 sellers in the family?
If seller number 1, well, I'll tell you what. Let's go ahead and answer your question by clicking the next button. Now I'll show you what happens. So we'll come back to this thing in a second. When you are looking at the positions, seller 1 and seller 2, By definition, seller 1 is always the primary. Okay? Which means the document is to be filled out by the primary. Document is to be filled out by the primary. However, the secondary signs the document. That make sense?
Mm-hmm.
So, hang on one second. Let me close the door. The dogs are getting loud. Okay, because seller number 2 is not primary, they are not obligated to check the boxes and fill out the details. Now, in this case,
So can't they fill it out together?
well, see, what is together when you talk about electronically? What is together? They're both hovering over the computer.
Someone has to put in
but-
the information, but someone has to agree to it as well. Seller 1 could enter it, but seller 2 is, this is 4 years old instead of 1 year old.
Okay, that's a great question. Okay, so when we're talking about an electronic signature process, seller number 1 is filling out the details. They're the ones who received the initial email. Now, if they put a checkbox in here that says that it's a septic tank, and seller number 2, seller number 2 is saying, no, it's a holding tank. If it's different, then by definition, seller number 2 needs to tell seller number 1, no, I'm sorry, you've got the wrong one here. Now, if they did it one after the other, then seller 2 could just reject it, go talk to his wife and say, I think we made a mistake here, because he can't modify it, which means he shouldn't sign it, right? So he would call back up to the agent and say, listen, Jackie put down that it was a septic tank. It's a holding tank. So we need that resent because I can't sign that because it's wrong. We realized that it was a mistake. Can you resend it to us? But electronic...
That's the whole issue. I mean, they should collaborate. When seller 1
Yes.
gets it, they should have sellers there too to make sure she's putting in the right information.
I totally agree. I totally agree.
That's why you've got the brown boxes against the brown seller 1's initials. So.
Yep, absolutely. Seller 1 is the primary. They're the ones that are responsible for the final version, but seller 2 is agreeing to it. Okay?
Yep.
All right. So, but that gives you an idea that seller number 2, in this case, the blue boxes, it doesn't change, and they can't. Well, think about it this way: seller number 2 can't overwrite something that seller number 1 signed and agreed to, because that goes against the collaboration. So they would need to work on it together, or maybe seller 1 was looking at it thinking, I'll put septic in here as the answer, and I should probably check to make sure. So you always want to check.
So, Robert, if each one, this is assuming that one is seller number 1 and the other one is seller number 2. What if they're both, you gave them a number 1?
Okay, the numbers on the previous page do not rank them. They don't.
Oh, okay.
It does not specify who's higher priority. It just specifies when they get it.
Oh, okay.
Okay. The prioritization happens when you define seller number 1. And seller number 1 should always be the primary. Male or female, it does not matter. This has nothing to do with that. It's the person who is the first name on the contract. Okay? Because we can't tell this system to make person number 2 the secondary, the seller number 2. We can't tell the system to rearrange that and make that one primary, giving them the blue boxes. What we would have to do is go back and swap them around so that we defined seller number 2 was the primary and seller number 1 would be the secondary. So it's all about the way that you write the contract.
All right. And I just have one other question, and that is, on the page before we got to this, how did you make, when I used to do it, I had to go in and put in the signature box and initial box for each one of them.
That's what I was...
yours, when you went in, it was already there.
Right.
So
that's
which
because
one
of
of
PreTag
these
Roles.
did you use to do that? The
Okay.
PreTag role?
PreTag Roles. That's what did That's exactly its purpose, is to say that you don't have to do that work, all that work. Okay?
All
So
right.
PreTag Roles defines, like for example, when I said that, the primary person, if I said that seller number one, now let's say, for example, that the two people in the room, John Astuto and Jackie Astuto, if I put them in the command database, and boy, this is actually a bigger question, but let's go ahead and deal with it. Okay. Right now, when I created the opportunity, Jackie Astuto was the primary because I created the opportunity under her name. Okay. Now I can add a co-seller right here. I can add her husband, John Astuto. I can add him. But that is by definition the co-seller. So I already created a situation where any changes now are really changes to the root element of the contract, right? So, but I can cheat. And I don't like this. And again, I'm not necessarily telling you to do this, but I could go in the DocuSign room and say, well, seller number one is defined as Jackie Astuto. That's where her role is. But I could pick somebody else. I could pick Robert Vincent as seller one and define Jackie as seller two for the signing process. So if John said to me, well, Robert in this case, I need to be first on this because Jackie isn't really good with all the numbers. I should take a look at this. I can go back here and put him as the number one signer and her as the number two. Now, when I do that, you'll see on the next page, I did that. Sorry. Oh, that was me going too fast. So look what happens. I've just swapped out the entire nature of this contract. Robert is primary and Jackie is secondary. Robert is now that gold color and he's the primary signer and Jackie is the secondary. So is that the right way to do it? Frankly, I don't think it is. If you are going to define somebody as the primary and then change that definition, you should do it in command. You should reset that thing so that you know ever going forward who the primary is on that. So this is not something I would typically change this late in the game because now we're on disclosures. Now we've got some contracts that might have been signed one way, and now we've got some that are going to be signed another way. Now you, Alice, as someone who deals in contracts, I would defer to you as to whether that's acceptable where one contract has Jackie first and one contract has John first. I mean, is that okay?
It is. It's fine.
Oh.
As long as both parties have signed.
Okay.
They don't have to be in any order. They just have to both sign it.
Okay. Well, that actually makes me feel a little bit better because at least I know now that it's not something where continuity matters as long as both have signed it in some capacity.
And the continuity really is for the client when you're sending that to them, so that every first one is where they sign and every second one is where the other one signs.
Yeah.
And sometimes they have 20 different places where they have to initial or sign.
Yep.
And I will go back in purposely and put them in the order that they should be so
There
it
you go.
stays consistent.
There you go.
Because, they get in the habit of being number one and then they sign the wrong one at number two.
Yep.
And then you have another one that's a blank and it'll send you a thing back saying everybody didn't sign.
Right, right. Ay. Okay, so that takes care of how forms are signed. I realize we're actually a little bit long here, but I'm going to show you how PDFs are worked because PDFs, again, are different. So I'm going to come back to the room. I closed out of the drafts and everything. So let's go back to the documents area. The same document, if we come down here, here's a property disclosure residential, okay? Same document in PDF form to start. If I right-click this and create envelope, you will notice that everything looks the same We have the opportunity to give it a name. We have the PDF here, which we can view. The difference is, remember, actually, this is filled out because I did this in the other class. So forgive this. This doesn't exist on this document because this PDF was actually a double send purposely to show some stuff. So this wouldn't be here because PDFs are not filled out. So there's no fields on a PDF. So those wouldn't be filled out. When we go to add recipient, notice that PreTag roles are not available. Okay. That means we can only add participants from the room. When we do that, we can see that there is, there's Alice, there's Jackie. So I'll add Jackie in here and we can click add selected. Now we can do the same thing as far as setting up number-wise who gets it when, but it's so important to recognize the next situation. None of the fields are going to be on the PDF when we go to click next. None of those yellow boxes are going to be there. None of the signature fields are going to be here because the document is flat. It's just a graphic. The system has no idea where these people are supposed to sign this, which means we would have to bring out all of the text boxes, all of the signature fields in the initial fields, all of the check boxes here. All of this stuff would have to come out one at a time. And this we don't want to do. If you're using a PDF, and in some cases you might have to, just be prepared to take the time to go through and add the required fields for the required signer. Making sure that you use the right color codes to put in the right fields in the right spots. And in this document here, I would never want to go through a disclosure form and not use PreTag roles because you would be here for an hour or 3 to get this thing ready to get out the door. Absolute nightmare. Okay. If it was just a brokerage relationship disclosure form, there's one signature on that. You could argue, 2 seconds, whatever. But something like this, don't ever use a flat PDF where there is a form that should be used instead.